What's up, everybody? Chris Harris here from Sample Spotlight, and today we will be looking at Strezov Sampling's latest release, Afflatus, Chapter 1, Strings. Afflatus features just around 60 gigabytes of installed content. It utilizes close, tree, and hall microphone positions, plus an onboard IR reverb. There's over 150 playable articulations that range between ensembles, DVC sections, string sound effects, as well as different experimental patches such as pads and just different ensemble setups. There's over 25 playable polyphonic true legato bowings in this library. Various ensemble sizes range from a quartet up to 40 to 50 players. It's for the free version of Contact Player 5.7.1 and above, and it retails for €799. It is currently on an intro pricing sale for $649. If you are a registered user of other libraries of Strezov sampling, you can log into your account on their website and look to see if you qualify for any cross-gradable pricing schemes. Which I think would, if you, own most of the libraries at Crossgrade, you can get down to €550 for the price of this. Okay, so let's kind of dive in here. This library is broken up into different, folders, if you will. And I apologize for my voice. There are wildfires happening near me that have caused the air to be unbreathable right now, so I'm a little hoarse, and I do apologize for the scratchiness. This library is broken up into different folders of ensembles, and then they have the sections violins 1, 2, there's violas, cellos, and basses. Then they have an experimental folder of patches, as well as their sound design folder that they're calling pads. Okay, so I'm going to go through all of the legato instruments because that's the hallmark of this library. That is the main feature. This utilizes all sorts of things such as polyphonic legato. There's DVC in a lot of these patches that will split the voices, in half. And so we'll just kind of dive in. So starting with the ensembles, kind of the baked patches, if you will, there is these patches, which I think are just gorgeous. The vintage violins 1 and 2 and the vintage violas and celli. And these are split into DVC sections, and again, they're half sections. So we're looking at 14 violins, and then split that in half, so 7. The DVC works by basically hitting your sustain pedal, and you can program this to basically be any type of MIDI CC automation. So let's just listen to a little bit, and let's get the keyboard back. Sorry about that. Sorry there, I'm using a Arturia key step as my controller, and it has a touch strip, which I'm not too familiar with at the moment. I'm still learning a lot of things about this keyboard. So if you touch it, it will kind of jitter back and forth. So I'll try to be a little bit more smooth on that transition. Anyways, here is the polyphonic sound without the VC. There you go. It just plays. That's, I think, the most important thing. If you recall my review a couple years ago of Freya when that came out, I believe that was the first library that they introduced their polyphonic legato script or programming that they've done. And that, right off the bat, it had some problems here and there, but it was also, I think, sampling voices can be difficult for us to hear it as realistic because the human voice is just so nuanced. Strings, it's a lot easier to do these types of programming with. And the way it works with this library, again, it just works. You just play, and it handles everything else for you. There's no need to kind of dial in different parameters for different timing situations. There's hardly any lag. For me, it feels very responsive, and I think that's a plus, because when you get to patches like this, you want to be able to just perform your parts and get them in there, and it sound great, and it does. And that's, like, I think, the very first thing I'd like to say. And for those that you follow some of my comments on social media as well as forums, I'm basically just repeating myself, because that's one of the biggest things of this library for me. Now, how does the DVC section work? So how I've been using this is I play anything. If it's a monophonic line, I don't use the DVC. And if I want to do polyphonic, then I switch to DVC. So I'll get something like this. Something like that. As you can see, you can just go back and forth between it, and it sounds great. Here's a better comparison of the DVC sound versus the full. That's the full. Here's DVC. As you can hear, the sound is a little thinner, which makes sense because this is less players. And the vibrato that is in these samples is a little bit more prominent in the smaller sections, because you have less players doing it, and you can almost hear the individual vibrato coming out. So the vintage violins and the violas and celli, they're playing unison with mutes. And so it is a very delicate sound. There's also light versions of this patch, of these two patches, that you can check out. We'll check out the violas and celli. As you can hear, there's also a slight spatial variation between the two. Here we have a full stereo sound, and when you go to the DVC, you'll hear it kind of departmentalize a little bit. You get less of the room reflections. And I've said this before on forums. When you're dealing with player sizes in the same type of room and space with samples, the smaller section there is, the less air is moved in the room, so the less reflections you're going to get. This is also the same with dynamics. The less players you have, the more, like, the quieter the dynamics, the same dynamics between a large section would be. So pianissimo with 3 players is going to be quieter than pianissimo with 6 players. And the way that they've done this library is they've captured that to where it's actually comparable. So if you actually look at the volume, I'll do a full up on the mod wheel here, which is dynamics. And you can see roughly where we're hitting volume-wise. Now, if I split the voices out and I play that, you can hear it's slightly quieter. When you double the voices, though, you get almost match to the volume of just the one voice without the DVC. So the idea here is that you can still maintain a proper balance when you split out your voices with the DVC section, and I think that's great. You have all the standard features here where you can route your microphone positions. You can also adjust the volume, solo and mute them, and you can pan them, which is great. Sometimes I might, when I'm using this library, I've used the close mics and to pan them more for directional for the instrument-specific sections. This definitely gives a better width to your mix. However, when you use the DVC mode, I found that the abrupt change is an abrupt change with the panning because of it being quieter. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis that I would say I would do that personally. But that's the violas and celli. Let's move on. Okay, staying within the ensembles patch, and there's actually one that I forgot to load, and it'll be at the end of this run-through of these patches here. But this is the Shark Strings Legato. Now, this is 10 celli, 8 basses, 2 pianos, all recorded in unison, and as you can tell by the name, it's designed for a very specific sound. Let's do that. There you go. It just plays. That's it. There's no additional features in terms of being able to mix the different blend of piano and strings, which I don't know if that's possible that they could do in an update where you could have just an additional slider that is the piano mix to where you can bring that up or down. But this was recorded together. Like all of these were recorded together in the same space. They're not separate sessions, which I think is great because it gives us a more natural characteristic of those two instruments playing. If you have any questions over these features, I recommend checking out their user manual, but it's pretty cut and dry that they've incorporated this little icon here that tells you what everything is. And again, it's simple. This is all... The way that this library was designed was to be user-friendly, work right out of the box, no learning curve whatsoever, and it sound great. And I think that they've nailed it. There are some extra features that I might include. Since some of these are locked patches, you might want to be able to control the volume of the legato transition, for instance. That might be a nice feature to include on here. And I'm sure there's other pro users who like to just tweak the hell out of their patches, and this might be one of those situations where they need to contact Strezov and ask for, can we get this, can we get that, and we'll see if we can add a few extra features on this page that can give you a little bit more customization to the sound that you're going for within the samples that they've created. So that's Shark String Legato. Now here we go to the first list of DVC sections, if you will, split out sections of violins, violins too. This is the chamber patches of just the legato, and I'll just do a quick run of all of these. I will also note that the size of these sections are compatible with the lush violins or the lush sections as well, in the sense that the lush patches are doubled the size of the chamber section. And so when you DVC the lush patches, you're actually getting the same size as the chamber violins. So there's some nice kind of mix and matching with the sizes that you can do between those two patches, but the sound is actually different. The lush 6 violins sounds different than the chamber 6 violins. So here we go. Here is the chamber violins. So that is, I guess, the basic sound. They're not sorry, I'm trying to think. They're not concertino, so it's just a nice natural sound. It's very full, even being just a 6 violin section, 6 players that is. But overall, a great sound. I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth here so you can just hear the difference between violins 1 and violins 2. And so as you can see, I've got violins 2 down here. You'll see this mute, and that's what I'm switching between. So here's violins 1. I'm just going to play the same note, kind of mid dynamics. Here's violins 2. Sorry, let me get the same dynamics. So you can hear the shift in the stereo spectrum, which is nice, because there's some libraries where the only difference between the violin sections is really just a timbre versus an actual spatial feeling that I'm moving from left to right or whatever the actual positioning is. So there is a discernible difference between the two sections, as well as there's a size difference with the second violins being only 5 players here. Here's the second violins patch. You've heard it. Sorry. All right, and then let's go to the violas. Now, I have to say, the tone of their violas, and they're using 4 players, is just wonderful. This is my problem. I can't ever do that. Excuse me. Let's go more mid-register here. Yeah, I love the violas in this library. They sound great. Okay, here's the cello. Let's go right to the low end here. Sorry, you could just play it like a piano and get a really big sound. So that's the cello. Very rich, nice sound. And I feel like a lot of the sound and character right out of the box is attributed to their reverb here. Here's just the regular mix of the cello. Pretty dry release, but overall there's a nice body to it, nice room in there, and you can mix and match as needed. I love the reverb that's on this. It blends with pretty much anything I've played it with, and so I really like using that. All right, here's the Lush violins. This has Divisi as well as a Sordino script included, so let's just get a listen to that. And these are I guess the idea of this is, just creating a lush patch. Now, there is a key switch here, which switches between the longs, and there's tremolo. Go up here. Here's Divisi. Now let's listen to the tremolo. Again, great sound. Here's Divisi. So, yeah. So that's nice right there that they've done tremolo, and the legato script is included on the tremolo patches. So that's the violins. One, I'm actually going to skip violins 2. Here's the violas. Again, love these. Jeez. As you can see, the polyphonic legato, you can do counterpoint within the one patch, and I think that that's awesome. I've not heard any. I haven't done a stress test to see just how crazy I can write counterpoint within just the one patch, or even the full ensemble patch which is the ensembles. Patches that are available, they've included a lush and a minimalist, which I'll get to the minimalist patches here in a second, full ensemble patch that will play legato. So you get baked basses, cello, violas, and violins all in one with all of this features, except I think they kept out the Divisi just because the patch, the size of it would be monstrous. Kind of moving on, I don't know what point I was trying to make there. The counterpoint. So utilizing just 2-voice counterpoint, I didn't hear any sample sharing where it was not sample sharing, but where if you're playing 2 voices, where when you change one of the second voices that might have been sustaining, it doesn't steal the transition from the higher voice or whatever. There is an intelligent voice leading going on here that looks at what you've played, or is reading what you're playing and logically applying the proper transitions between the notes, and I think that works very well. It certainly is much better than any polyphonic legato I've used in Contact. At least I've not really seen a polyphonic legato instrument in a non-Contact library at this point. At least I've not tested one, but compared to all of the players out there that have created this type of technology even years ago, it felt like a gimmick until Strezov came out with theirs, where you had to do something weird, some type of programming to get it to work right, and this you don't. You just play it and it works. That's it. Just leave it, play it and forget about it. Just draw in your dynamics or adjust your note starts or tail, end of the notes and whatnot. And there you go. Here's the sound of the sordino on the violas. Actually, let's go back here. Here's the natural sound. Here's sordino. Now, in the past, I'm very critical about sordino scripts. Every developer that's done it, it's been drastically different between them. I feel like Strezov sounds the most natural of the ones I've heard, but it's still, there's something there that doesn't work for me, so I probably won't use this too much, but it doesn't sound terrible, and I think that that's a good thing to note. In case you're wondering what this is whether or not you want to use all samples to save RAM. If you click it, you'll get just the full section, and you won't have Divisi. If you click it out, you can get just the half section without DVC. If you click it again, then you get all of it with the DVC functionality. So there you go. There's that. Let's go on to the cello, the Lush cello. Discern a drastic difference between the full section and half section here, and I think that's great. DVC is such an interesting thing that developers have been trying and have been doing for a while now, and I think the biggest thing for me is being able to hear just the difference between the sizes of sections, and I think this does it very well. The drastic change, I think, helps, but also just the actual voicing, the balancing when you add notes in is what really does it for me. Okay, here's the basses. Now, this is the first bass patch that we've come across here for legato. And let me go down. Now, personally, I would love if they added a DVC section of 3 basses, just to get a little bit more of the character and grit from a smaller bass section to incorporate with this. But I understand it's really hard to get a lush sound with a smaller bass section just because of how much the low strings vibrate, and like they just sound really gritty on bass strings. So I feel like that would be a hard sound to get with smaller basses, and that might be why they haven't done a DVC section. But that's just me wanting to almost just know what the sound would be like. So there's the basses. And sorry, I'm kind of trying to breeze through these because most of these patches you probably already watched the walkthroughs, and I'm just being redundant here. Here's the minimalist violins. Now, these were recorded performing espressivo and flautando together to get the more intimate and emotional sound. There is also other patches which I can demonstrate later of tenuto and harmonics with these patches, with the minimalist kind of style. Again, this is DVC as well. Now, this patch by far, for all the instruments doing the minimalist sound, is the most laggy of the legato, and that's kind of for a reason, because it's more about this very smooth and connected sound. And that was kind of the idea behind this patch, was to give more of a intimate and emotional sound, I think, is... and there's a nice little bloom on the notes here. Listen. Very subtle, but very nice. But very good for creating just a nice pad, if you will, almost. But really, a very slow lyrical line could go a long way with this patch. And you can really hear the rosin and air around the instruments with those close mics too. All right, so there's the minimalist violins. I'm going to skip those. Here's the violas. Here we go. here's the cello. Divisi. There you go. All right, let's check out the Scene d'Amour violins. This is one of the bread and butter patches of this library. If we solo that, there we go. Now these are very small sections with concertino and multivibrato being the main character of the sound. So you get, just listen to that vibrato. Very, very gorgeous multi-vibrato performance. Again, we're still in the legato here. Let me get rid of that. There we go. Let's skip the second violin. Sorry, I just... There we go. If you do some proper orchestration with these, playing these in octaves would give you a wonderful soaring line. And again, these are even small sections too, and you can just get a really powerful performance out of them. Somebody had asked about I guess the dexterity of the legatos as to whether or not these can do like fast runs and stuff like that. This library wasn't really designed for that with the first iteration. This is just chapter 1, if you will, of what could be a much larger series of instruments available, and they really focused more on the nuanced lyrical aspect of the strings and what they can do that's missing. There's a lot of libraries out there already that have fast legato that's agile and can do runs and all that, and that's great. Check those out. This is kind of filling in the gaps that's not really covered well and that's from their words, but also I've been using this library. Well, let me go back. Strezov Sampling approached me over a year ago to ask me if I'd be interested in reviewing this library. And I think at that point they had the idea, and I'm not going to speak for them per se, but it feels like they thought they were going to have it out in a few months from when they approached me. And when they got going and started developing and creating patches, they just kept going back into the studio and doing more, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. But the first patches that they sent me were in beta, actually at the very beginning of this year, and it was the minimalist patches. And I was blown away by the sound because there just wasn't anything like that with the tenutos, and again, I'll show those later. But they just kept developing and coming up with different, focusing on a very specific sound when they would go into the studio. And each little pocket of samples, within each section and in the ensembles is the direct result of that, just hyper-focused on a specific sound. And then they found a way to put it into a big collection. So anyways, I've been following this for quite a while, as you can see, starting with the minimalist patches almost exactly a year ago. I'm liking what I'm hearing. So that's the violas. All right, so now we're getting into the experimental territory. There's a number of patches, but there's a few patches that have legato in this folder. The first one is the angelic strings. And again, all the same functionality. You have violins and choirs. I don't know, and I didn't think to ask Let me see if I can look that up. Nope. Okay. I don't know if they what size string section they used. So maybe they could add that to here because this might be something that you could layer with one of the other patches and it work really well. So here's the angelic strings. Again, all the same scripting, it all just works. So that's their experimental. Again, the experimental patches aren't necessarily supposed to be a super fine-tuned sound, if you will. From when I asked Strezov Sampling about these, one of their responses was, honestly, the patches were just ideas that users had that have layered with their other libraries and said, check out this sound. Thus, they created some of these experimental patches to test that out, and some of them turned out really well, and they decided to include them in this. We have the Pharaoh strings, which is violins and ethnic woodwinds, or ethnic woods, if you will. And then in the lower register, so again, very just different character to that, to kind of give us some range as to what applications this library could be used for. Here's the Middle East strings, 14 violins, 4 violas, and 3 celli. Sorry, we have yeah, I forgot about this one. So we have like a spiccato on lower velocity, and then like a little trill. And the first thing I would say right off the bat is we need to have control over that on here. We need to have where the velocity trigger is going to happen for those circumstances, because for me, this controller I'm using, it's very hard to play soft on it, and play soft and be, play fast stuff. But that's a really cool sound, and I like that. They should honestly make a regular patch of the different sections doing that. I would love that, to be quite frank. So if they're willing to go back in the studio and add even more content, which I should admit they are doing, they're adding a Scene d'Amour celli, and they're also creating like a first chairs section of, I guess, solo strings, if you will, for us to use in this library. And they said that that's going to come sometime in Q1 of 2019. So let's hear what's up in the upper end here. So a little bit more of a syrupy transition, portamento transition. And it almost sounds like even like the violins are such a multi-vibrato that are bending in and out of the pitch, which is pretty cool. Okay, and then going back to the ensemble section, I missed this one. It's the Christmas strings, which is 6 violas, 4 celli, and an alto saxophone. And this is just to give us that kind of nice, Christmassy, rich sound. And to be honest, I can't really hear the alto sax until we get into the lower dynamics. Which I guess is nice. It's subtle, but it's there. Okay, so let's go back to a blank slate here, and I'm going to go to the ensemble patches, and I'm just going to throw in some stuff here. So here we have the barbaric strings. And this is an interesting patch. So in the top half here we have cello and violas, I think. Let me make sure I get this correct. So we have cello and basses, collegno and octaves, played with sticks in the lower octave, and then violas playing spiccati and cello playing collegno in unison in the top half here. Which, again, this articulation does not exist in a playable ensemble like this out there. Sure, you can layer in other libraries and get this sound, but this is together. So you get the natural room sound of handling those sounds. And then we get the lower octave. Which I would love if we could have a just on 127 velocity, men shouting there. Wow. I would love that. They did something like that with Votan, where you could have shouts on the hardest velocity layer. That would be really cool with this patch. They did that. That would probably fit more in the experimental though. I've shown you Christmas strings. Here is the contemporary strings. This is 12 strings, again, which fits with the lush section size. So you can really utilize this alongside the lush strings and still have a nice full sound that's similar. So there we get the lower end. Let me go down again. Let's go up. Go up again. Sorry, real cheesy part there. Let's get to the higher. There you go. So that's the contemporary string section, and that's just spiccato, basically. I'm going to skip the ensemble shorts, which is basically the individual sections broken down. All right, here we have the heroine strings. This is a 22-string piece ensemble, and this is playing staccato with a softer attack. So you get kind of a more mellow... that's not clipping. All right, and moving on. So those are the heroine strings. All right, here we have the Le Sacre strings. This is a 50-piece string ensemble. These are Tenuto's Molto Espressivo. And I think they have a subtle performance script on here that kind of gives us a nice cutoff so you can play. Again, you can kind of, there's a little bit of a performance aspect where you can get a short and a longer sound out of it. So that's kind of cool. All right, and then let's move on to the pop low strings. And these are 2 celli spiccato and 1 contrabass pizzicato. Go. Pretty simple sound. All right, and here's another staple of this library, the staccato high strings and low strings, which I'll show you in a second. These are basically what they sound like. Concertino aggressive shorts, violins 1 and 2, and violas here. Let's go up again. That's pretty much what they're going for with this. I don't have the lower ones, but yeah, the idea is to give very aggressive shorts, and I wonder if these are all down bow only. I'm just curious. And then we get the low strings, which is cello and basses and octaves. It says unison, but that sounds like octaves to me. Oh yeah, that's wrong. So anyways, great sound there. Here's another great patch, is the Quartet Sforzando. It's just the first chairs playing Sforzando shorts. And they... So just really cool. Anyways, really cool sound. And this is all to the natural sound. There isn't reverb on that one. All right, here's another great one. Sorry, these are all great. A 50-string ensemble called the Red Army Strings. Now, this one is a marcato with a molto vibrato on it. But there's a twist. Like the La Sacra strings. you get a shorter release the shorter you play it. Within reason. Anyways, there you go. That's the Red Army strings. And then we have the Roof Chase. 22 strings. Aggressive Spiccato. So yeah, this is great for ostinatos. This library is. You can program some really cool sounds. I already showed you the Shark Strings Legato. Here's the Shark Strings Marcato. And then we have the same but for staccato. Again, now I'm going to get sued. All right, the Mouse Strings, and this is just full strings pizzicato. Anyways, and then we have the Undercover Strings, which is 5 cellos, 3 basses, 2 saxes, and 2 pianos. And then you get this type of sound. Anyways, you get the idea. That's what's happening with that ensemble. Okay, let's go real quickly. I'm going to pull up the violin spiccato. Now I'll break it down. I'm not going to go through all of them. So each individual section of strings, they have the character patches: the scene d'amore, the minimalist, and the lush. And I'll show you the impressionist in a second. But then there's just chamber violins. If you want just a standard section, the chamber violins or the chamber sections can be paired with the individual articulation spiccato and pizzicato. And then you can also use the impressionist patches for trills. Now, this is the first library that I've used that has recorded trills up to an octave. Now, you can't, there's finger trills and there's bowed trills. I think finger trills can go up to a fifth, and anything above that, it has to be a bowed trill. And this library does that, and it's the first time I've used something or have heard something that does this in samples. And it's really easy. You can get just a natural, straight, bowed sound. And then once you add in your the interval of choice, it changes. Third, fourth, and that actually sounds more like a bowed sound. And they've done it for everything. This is amazing. I love this patch. But so again, within the section you have trills, pizzicato, spiccato, tenutos for the minimalist and the sin d'amore, and then regular legato. So there's a lot here already, and just the individual patches that can cover a lot of ground. And then in the basses, there is Bartok pits. There's the trailer basses, which is, let me see here. It's over the top for contrabasses, suitable for epic and grandeur music. It's pretty big sounding. Here's warrior basses. Oh, that's what I wanted. I hadn't played this patch yet. Oh, there you go. That makes me smile. All right, and then let's check out the pads here as the final bit to cover. So this is their pad sound design engine by this guy. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because I will screw it up, and that's unfair to that person. Very simple concept here. You have layers that you can control, and each patch has 4 layers, or some is missing, like this one doesn't have textures on it. But you can control and mute and balance them. But the idea is kind of just a one-shot soundscape. So we can turn the perk down. Just get that. Or we do the alien alarm. And so there's sci-fi and fantasy. Let's do forest creep. This is great for just video game ambience. Or the beginning of a Rush song. Okay, so that pretty much covers the. I mean, there's a lot of presets. Sorry. I wish that they made this bigger here, because I end up clicking things and missing it. You know, I want that to be bigger. But all in all, they've covered a lot of ground with just this one release. There's a lot of, there's certainly things that some people might not use. Again, I feel like the pads and the experimental patches, they're not so much a main feature of this library. They were an additional add-on to give the library a little bit of depth past just strings, and give you a little bit more to work with outside of just writing string music. But all in all, for the price and what you get, again, there's like 25 different legatos. That's pretty impressive. And the dexterity of the legato is, I guess, in question for some as to whether or not it can play fast. And it's like, no, this, again, wasn't designed to do that. If there's a way that they can script their legato with a speed knob where you can make the transition a little faster and it still sound good, which I fear that wouldn't sound good, just speeding up the transition. You would lose the natural characterization of it. But what I want is, something to be that fills in the gaps for me, and it's done really well. And that's what this library does. So here I am, just over an hour, because there's a lot of content to cover. If you stuck with me this long, thank you. I hope you found it useful. I wish I could have answered more questions had I found some, but I think for, again, going back to the discussion of how expensive this library is, again, it's, to me, this surpasses a lot of string libraries in terms of content and usable content in it. So thanks for watching. Check out Strezov sampling, strezov-sampling.com if you want more information. Again, if you're a user, go to your user account, see if you qualify for any cross grades if you're interested in this library, and ask questions below if you want to know more. And yeah, thanks for watching. Take care. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.